Okay.
Yes. All right, do you want to go ahead and flip it to the next one? And so, first of all, welcome everyone. Appreciate your time for joining today. Meg and Deb are really going to take you through how you can do an implementation with Workfront Planning, Core, and Fusion. They're going to show you some automation that I saw, which was really pretty cool. And this is your takeaway would be some ideas that you can adapt and actually simplify some of the intake, improve execution, and also to give leadership, better insight into work across the organization. So I'm excited about this, and save your questions till the end. I'll kind of keep track of the chat, and when they get done, then we'll get all your questions answered. Okay, I'm going to go through housekeeping.
Thank you.
So just want to let everybody know that this is going to be recorded, and then it'll be uploaded to the YouTube channel. And the house rules, we say this every time: no self-promotion. Don't contact people outside of the user group without their consent. You could contact Deb, Meg, and myself at any time. And, if user group shares their use case at the meeting, please don't share that information without consent. And I'm going to go ahead and hand off to Deb and Meg now to start their presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. Okay, great. So I'm going to start it off today. And today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the steps we took to build the instance for planning and core, and using Fusion to connect the two. So we're going to go through what is a connected record in planning. We're going to talk about the workspace in planning. We're going to talk about the build in core. And then we're also going to get into, Meg is going to get into the Fusion scenarios and how she connected the system. So just as a little background about who we are, I'm Deborah Baker. I'm the marketing workflow leader for my company. And so I tend to be the architect for what we do in Workfront. And Megan Lehman is my partner in crime, and she is a Workfront developer. And so she helps me make the vision come to reality. And so without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so when you're building a marketing system of record, and we are marketing heavy and focused in our organization, we were tasked to build an environment that can facilitate end-to-end templates from beginning to start to finish. And the system that we built here was something that took multiple issues that were submitted and condensed them into one. It was a major consolidation effort, and I have a feeling that a lot of you may be tasked with some similar issues, particularly at the enterprise level. And so this system facilitates workload for all the job roles that you see listed to the right here on the screen. And what we do here is an issue comes in through planning. It will be then added to planning. It will then spin out a program. It will spin out a hero derivative with a queue on it, so that you can also have one-off projects and derivatives related to a hero project inside of a campaign program. And then we have visibility for that inside of both environments, including dashboards, reports, and boards. So we'll just get into it. So how are we connecting records in the system? And so first and foremost, if you do or do not know about planning, planning is organized into taxonomies and operational records. And what I always tell people to do is, as something to get started, is before you even get into Workfront, you need to think about your form fields. What is it that you're collecting? What is the data that you need in order to get the environment built and then spun up into core? And so what we did is we had a very heavy meeting with stakeholders, and we talked through what is the bare minimum that we need to get articulated in order to spin that environment up into the system. And so what we're going to focus on today, we're going to focus on program connections, project connections, and then the environments between the two. So what I did here, and what you're looking at right here, is something I did in Lucid Charts. And this is something that I did to wrap my brain around what is it that we're connecting, and what is the purpose of these fields, and why are we doing it? And then we also needed to determine how many operational records we need, and what are the taxonomies for those, and can those taxonomies be shared from business unit to business unit. And so, this is exactly what we needed to do in order to make a system that made sense to us. And by the way, I will share this deck with you afterwards. So if you didn't get to read through all of that, we'll share that later. But this then led into, how am I going to articulate what my vision is for Meg and to hand it off to her? And so what we did is we built 2 Fusion scenarios. One was to build the program and the hero, and the other one was to attach derivatives to that hero project. So once it was submitted through the system, Fusion would trigger ready for program. Fusion would go out, create the record, create the project. Fusion transposed information from the brief down to the task level, which we'll talk about that a little bit. Fusion then would notify the owner and the requester was ready, and then the project manager would step in and turn the project on to ensure all the information that we asked Fusion to do made it down to the task level. And so that was pretty much the system that we built on the back end as far as the plan. So then once we built the plan, we started to build the space. So we would go into planning. And for example, in this sample here that I'm showing you, we have operational records listed at the top and we have taxonomies in the bottom. And what is so great about planning for the stakeholders that we were working with was it gave business, marketing, and sales leadership visibility into what we were doing. And that visibility was missing in the other tools that they were using. And so they felt like this would be a really great bridge to get into Workfront and to use it and make it meaningful for the people doing the work. And one thing that I did want to make mention here is you do not need to have this many taxonomies. In fact, you don't need any taxonomies at all if you don't want to. But if you have connected fields or taxonomies that other pieces, other teams, part of a larger enterprise level may need, you may want to consider those taxonomies. But it is not necessary to build inside of an operational record. And if you have any questions about that, we could talk about that more at the end. But just keep that in mind. It's not always necessary to do this heavy of a build with what you're trying to do with planning. So what was the item that started to connect the 2 channels together from planning into core? Well, we needed to make a brief that people wanted to use, and we needed it to mean something. And so by identifying these basic questions and what we're required to get into the system, we were then able to use a trigger. And right down here where it says ready for program, this yes column in this custom field is the trigger to tell Fusion that it's ready to build a project. Now, some of the stakeholders or campaign managers might not be ready to build yet. They might just want to gather their thoughts or start putting all the information into their operational record before it actually builds and moves into core. And so that's why we made it a form field. We made it a place where they could decide whether or not to trigger on intake, or they could just add it to planning and trigger it later into core. We can talk about that a little bit later. So what did we do here? So what you're looking at right now is a sample environment. And as those 3 fields that you're looking at is the program, the hero project, and that link there under the T is the link that links you to the request queue inside of the hero project. So what's great about this view is not only could we build a view where it's showing timelines, but then it made it really easy for the stakeholder to find the connected records they needed per line item. And here's the other thing that's really great about this too. Depending on how many operational records you need, you can start connecting records to records. Because in this environment, this is just a campaign where it's a portfolio that is a parent campaign. The program is the child campaign. The hero is the main derivative or deliverable that we want to capture leads on. But you may have an epic where you may have multiple hero deliverables inside of different campaigns. You can build that out too if you want to, but for our instance, this is what we did for now. There's a lot of opportunity on the horizon for us to see where we can build this out with other parts of the environment as well. What else is also great about this is we identified who the content owners were in planning. That also helps with the Fusion builds. You can assign work in core from your ownership inside of planning. We also have other derivatives that sit inside of the program. We wanted visibility into everything inside of that program, not just the hero, but we did want to identify what the hierarchy is throughout the system. The all projects is, and I wanted to show you this back end. So the connected field in this record is right here, and it's the all projects field. So for example, if you're in Core and you look at this hero deliverable project, infographic, blog post, white paper, etc., the connected field and planning would all look right like this. It tells you exactly what the name of the operational record is, and then it tells you which field in planning is connected. You can have multiple fields connected too, which we do. You can have program fields connected, but right now we chose to use the project fields to connect. And then again, this is the trigger at the end. It's a singular field. Now, this can be a little tricky because if someone removed that yes and put it back in, it would trigger another build. So that's why it's really important to build governance around and train people so that they understand what they can do versus what they can't do. So what this does is it triggers the fusion scenario, which Meg will get into a little bit later, and she's going to talk about how this works. So build a view that your users want to see. You know, I cannot stress it enough that a big part of what we found in discovery is that, you know, we really need to create something that people want to use. As you all know, Workfront is not user-friendly out of the box. So when we built this, it was really important for us to build something that they wanted to actually use. And so we found that putting it in this Gantt chart view, project over project, inside of each program, and then you can also group them inside of the parent campaign, allowed us to build an environment that everybody wants to get in and use and to see. It's also very motivating for users to get in there and use it, because then they can start to see their work in this really nice flow that everybody really enjoyed. So building our core environment, I'm going to hand this piece over to Meg. She's going to talk about how we built the core piece.
Thank you, Deb. I turned off my camera, guys, because my computer likes to give me fits lately, so I'm trying to use as little bandwidth as possible here. But yeah, so at this point, we're wanting to move our request into the core environment. So we're taking a request that originates in planning, and we are basically copying it as a new request in core, and then doing what we need to do with it from there. So the first main thing that we need to do is have a form that matches the planning form in core. So each field that you're bringing over from planning has to have a place to go. So we had to create a mirror form on the core side here. So each field you'll find in both places. This also can get tricky because you have to update fields in both places if things need to be updated. So again, as the governance thing, you need to have good rules around how you're managing those field changes and things like that. But yeah, so core needs to match your intake and planning. And then also, when you convert a request in core from a request into a project, all of those intake fields get plopped on the project level. And we have users who are assigned to tasks in all of these templates who prefer to work exclusively on boards. And if you use boards, you know that the cards, connecting cards to task can only show task level fields. So rather than have them have to go search, open their card, open the project, go to the project details, sift through the information that they need to know to complete their task, we utilized Fusion to copy the necessary fields from core and copy them down to the task description level to appear on the cards. And it's, you know, for design, it's just the fields that design needs to see. For editorial, it's just the fields that editorial needs to do their work, so they don't have to go around poking and searching to find the information that they need to complete their job. Thank you for flipping through that.
Yeah.
So the other tricky part about this is So our initial requests are coming out of planning. Program request, we've made the decision, has to come from planning because we need a planning record for everything to originate. The tricky part comes when you then request derivatives later on from Core, finding the planning record to tie it back to. And there are modules in Fusion which can search for the name of the program in planning to match the name of the program in Workfront. But again, just like Deb was talking about with the ready for project field or ready for program field, people can get in there and change it. So it's not very reliable to rely on the name of the program planning record in order to find where to tie these derivatives back to. So what we did was we built into our Fusion scenario when we convert the request originally and we create the program, we grab that record ID from planning and put it on the program level field. So just we have a reference. We've got like a pin in it, like when you park your car and you drop a pin, just so we can get back to it easily from future Fusion scenarios. So that was something that we kind of discovered a little further in the process. We had to go back and figure out how to make that work. And so that's something that I would definitely recommend is just keeping a record of that associated planning ID in your core program or project. And just quickly to show kind of where to find that information when you're in planning and you open up one of your line items, planning records, you've got your workspace ID first, WS, / and then record type, which is, you know, the table view. And then after that, you've got your record ID. So this is the record ID that you want. This will take you to this line item in planning. So just kind of an anatomy there of what your URL looks like.
I also wanted to add to this that, and I think I'm going to go to the next one, Meg, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So I want to show you a side-by-side of planning and core and why that record became so useful. You know, we had some instances where records were just being built or there was no family or they were coming in from the wrong place. And I'll get into that a little bit here in a minute. But we didn't know what we realized is that we had some major gaps. And those major gaps were exactly this, the record ID, because you need to be able to show in core the line item in planning. So these two need to be lockstep. This all projects reports mirrors and mimics this program operational record. So this is our checks and balances. And if a record in the core environment is missing this planning ID, then we know that something happened and we need to investigate why that happened. And so as that was happening, this was the solution that I came up with to make it stop. And so what was happening is we had at a core, we made it okay to also request a hero out of there and build a program. And what was happening is it was not calling back to planning. So it was creating that information in core, but there was nothing happening on the other side. And so what we did here is we decided to do this change governance and force the change management in intake. You know, so, are you sure you're in the right location for this request? You know, that's really important because part of this training that we went through, we did it in the videos. We did it in the one-off sheets that we shared with them. We also did it in the full, vision of what we were doing. We told them at every step of the way that they needed to request this from planning. But as you all know, human behavior, they need to be reminded, but then also showed. And sometimes you need to shut down the door, close the door that they were using. But you can't just close the door without explaining why. And so this is a really good way for you to do that. Now, in order to put an image inside of your request form, you do need the ability to put images into some sort of a space that's public, whether it's a DAM or a website or whatever the case might be, in order to have an image show up here. But we just built a real simple image and was like, hang on a second, And then we explain to them what we're trying to do. And I will tell you, within 24 hours of releasing this change on our intake, we had 3 out of our 4 stakeholders who typically had issues navigating the system and knowing where they were actually start to use the system as it was intended. And so that helped the project management office because we were spending a lot of time reworking or recovering jobs that were just submitted incorrectly. And so that was a lot of rework that we were able to give up just by putting this in here and saying, hey, you're not in the right place. You need to go over to planning. We also built this one-sheeter. And I can't stress enough that when you have user adoption, you need to make it easy for them to understand. And so I made a 7-page document, almost like a manual of how this works. No one's going to read that, but the system admins, really. So we needed to come up with something to get them to the instance and to make it very simple. So we explained to them what the different types of requests are out of the system that they're requesting. We gave them access to the project report and core to make sure that they know what they're requesting in planning. And then we told them, if you want to submit a program, this is how you do it. Here's the link. You want to submit a program in a hero, this is how you do it. If you want to submit a derivative, this is how you do that. And by giving this governance and giving them all of these resources and tools, you have less gaps for them to fall through or trapdoors for them to get lost. And then you can also understand where they're coming from and what they need and how to support them. And if you need to create any other trainings for them in the process. I'm going to hand this over to Meg to talk about the fusion scenarios.
All right, thank you. A little bit of a peek behind the curtain. So this is the scenario which initially fires off when someone puts in a request for a new program or a new program plus a hero deliverable. And I looks all zigzaggy because I was trying to scrunch it up on the screen so you can somehow sort of read it. But the trigger is, like we talked about before, that ready for program field gets toggled on. And this scenario is looking for that immediately. So immediately that gets toggled on and saved, this scenario fires off and it reads the record. It goes and creates the request in Workfront to mirror the exact request in planning. And then the first offshoot there, if they just requested a program, it creates the program and then closes the request and then updates planning links. In this scenario, it's really easy to find the planning record because that's what we came from on the trigger. So we have that information in the fusion scenario already. We don't have to search for it. When we get to the next one, I'll show you the difference there that we have, actually have to search for that. So then we update the planning links. If they requested a program and a hero deliverable, it would go on the second offshoot from the router there, which converts the request into a project. After the program is created, it then creates a project with that request. And then we set all of the information for the project manager, the sponsor, the owner, all of that is in the initial intake. So we set the project to match that. And then after the second router is where the trickle down stuff happens down to the tasks. So first we're searching for marketing manager tasks and assigning them to that person that is given to us in the request. And then we're searching for any editorial tasks and we search for those by the assigned role. So we assign a role in the template to all editorial tasks for our copywriter. So we're looking for those. And then we update the task description with the pertinent information fields from intake for our editorial team. And that goes in the task description, which is then visible within the card on their board. And then the same for design. We look for design tasks based on it's assigned to designer role. And then we update the design task description. And then we are finding the project manager name and sending them an update saying, hey, this has been created. It's ready for you to review and turn it on to in progress once you've looked it over, make sure everything is how you want it to be. And then we go again and update the planning link. So we go back to planning and we say, we created this program, let's connect it. We created this project, let's connect it in planning. So that's how we kind of get that initial ball rolling. Before we go to the next slide, I know it is a little cuckoo bananas looking, but just stay with me. I'm going to explain it. It's really not as crazy as it looks. So go ahead. This is our derivative / one-off request. So these initiate in core, and then we create derivatives off of that depending on where they're requesting it and the information that they put in there. So I've kind of broken this down a little bit so you can see most of these offshoots are doing the same thing, just with a different variable. So it's not as ginormous as it seems. So Deb, if you'll zoom in there on number 1. So this is just we're watching for ready for project status in core. So once they've submitted their derivative request in core, the project manager goes and reviews it and then flips it to ready for project when they want the project created. And that's what this scenario is looking for. So once it's ready for project, we read all of the information. And then if you want to go to the next little set, this whole web is probably not needed by everyone in this type of scenario. The reason for all of this is just because we use different program fields per portfolio field, if that makes sense. So if someone picks portfolio X, then a field pops up that shows programs that are only available in portfolio X. If one day Workfront decides to make options filterable by prior questions, I would be, so thankful, because that's like something that comes up all the time. We have a ton of programs. They don't want to go scroll through hundreds of programs to find the ones they want. We need to like pull it down to just the ones that relate to the portfolio or campaign that they're talking about. So this whole web is just to find the program field. So if you have all your programs in one field, then you won't even need this part. So that's all that's doing, is just finding that information. Okay, and then we get to the main split. So we have 2 entry points in core. We have the front door, which is what we call, you go to your menu, you click on requests, you go put in a new request. That's what we consider the front door. They also have the ability to request directly out of the hero project. So those hero projects are created with a queue already attached for derivative requests. So depending on where they enter in core is where they'll go on this split here. If they're requesting out of the hero, you can imagine there's a lot less information that we need to ask, because we already have a lot of the information from the program and the hero project that we need. If they're coming from the front door, we're asking a lot more details about where does this go? What is this related to? So that's why those are split off into 2 different directions there. Okay, next tab. All right, and so if they're coming in the front door, they are either requesting a hero or a derivative / one-off. And depending on which one of those they choose, it splits them in these 2 directions, because there are different templates being used for the 2 of those. Everything after this point on all 3 offshoots, I guess we'll call them, is doing the same thing. So that's why there's so many modules on here, because we've got basically doing the same thing 3 different times. All right, so if you go to the next one, the last one, this is what happens at the end of each one of those offshoots. So again, just like in the previous slide, we have reading the project information and trickling the information down to the task level, notifying the project manager, and then finding the project in planning. And you can see this is the first blue planning module that we have in this scenario. So we don't already have access to the planning record ID to find it. And that's where that extra field comes in really handy. So we'll read the program details and find that field that we pinned when we first created the program. And that's how we find the record and planning that we need to connect these derivatives to. And the other really tricky part of this is Fusion by default, when you add a connected record to planning, it doesn't really add it, it overwrites what's in there. So that became a problem because our derivatives are requested not all at the same time. You know, down the road, we might be requesting 3, 4, 5, 6 more derivatives. And if it just overwrites the information in planning, then we're only getting one connected record. And that's not what we want. So what we needed to do was create a formula that reads what's in there now connected in planning, and then combines it with the new ID of the project that we just created and added in this Fusion scenario, put them together, and then place that whole array into planning to update and just reconnect. Basically, you're reconnecting everything plus the additional project that you just created. So that was something that was really, really tricky about this. This is what took the longest for me to figure out. A lot of back and forth, trying to figure out why this was overwriting. I'm like, why can't we just tell it to add instead of overwrite? But that's a lot of things. So had to figure that out on my own. So that's something tricky that if you decide to do something like this, just keep that in mind. But yeah, that's kind of how the two scenarios work in Fusion that we've implemented on this. And that's it. I think the next one's you, Deb.
Awesome. Awesome. So what's on the horizon for us? So, as you know, Workfront is a never-ending iteration. So we're starting to investigate automation in planning. And some of you may or may not know, but there is a function in planning that allows you to do some of what we were doing with Fusion. So we will start to potentially break down these scenarios and remove portions of it or whatever we can and put it into planning instead of using operational dollars and cents for Fusion. So we're trying to see where we can diversify and move some things around to keep because the more Fusion scenarios that we do, as you know, the more money it costs to produce. So we're trying to make sure that they stay efficient as we continue to look onto the horizon for new things. Consider building a derivatives operational record. That's another piece of this. It's like what we're finding is if you have some things out of core and some things out of planning, there will always be this level of confusion that people will have. So if you can make it true north, make planning true north, then everybody is doing the same thing. So that's something that we're looking into. Now that we've built this out, we need to explore other types of records that we may need to have. We're also, looking at a macroed Excel document for mass uploads. I've already created this. We don't have a whole lot of time, I think, for this session, but if there is some interest there, I'm happy to show everyone how I built that macro document in order to bulk upload programs into planning. So we can talk about that and see if there's any interest. And if you are interested, say, I'm interested, I want to know. I'm happy to throw that together. And then last but not least, optimize Fusion to prep for AI. So as AI is hot and heavy on the horizon for us, and as we're working through our governance and how we are going to use AI in our space, we need to keep that into our consideration. So as we look forward, consider how AI is going to also play into this build. So do any of you have any questions? And I'm going to pop out of screen share mode.
You know what? There is one question from Beatrice. I wasn't aware that planning scenarios have an impact on cost. How come? Do you have any information on that?
Oh, I think that so if you're doing automations out of planning instead of out of Fusion, I think that the money would be using the built-in module out of planning. So that's something that we want to explore. And that's something that I also want to find out about. So if we're moving some of the automations out of Fusion and into that tool, are we going to still continue to use the operational power of Fusion or not? Per cost, not planning is my understanding. Yep. So I think that there's things that we need clarity on to understand. If we can pull some of that money out of Fusion and put it into planning, and it's not going to affect that operation, then that would be ideal. Because I'm starting to see the more Fusion areas that we build, we're starting to get closer to our maximum. So I want to make sure that we don't hit that maximum. Yeah.
Has anyone used chat? I have a question. Has anyone used chat GPT for like automated workflows, building agents to do some of the work? Would that be something that would take the place of some of the things that Fusion can do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so what Adobe is working on right now, we're not really at liberty to talk about currently, but that is being articulated right now. And I do know that is going to be part of the Workfront universe in the future, but how they plan on rolling that out, that's what they're working on right now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a good question, Heather. I guess my answer to that would be, the question is, how do you gauge what's worth building in Fusion versus waiting for planning upgrades? I guess how urgent it is for you to get it going. And, you never know. Even if you know an upgrade is happening in planning, it's hard to know when it's coming out. So if you need something done now, we usually opt for Fusion, and then maybe in the future we can look at adjusting based on what comes out in planning. And yeah, that's really kind of how we do it. If we can do it with a planning upgrade, we know it's coming out, and it's not something that's super urgent, then we might just wait. Deb, do you have any?
Yeah, I agree. I think that I think that what is really coming to us and what we're understanding is that there's going to be more options for us to make choices. How these agents are used, or knowing which tool to use, one versus the other, I also think is something worth discussing and maybe even doing sessions on. If we learn more about this as we continue to build our instances, and through the champions and through all of the other folks that are our voices of the tool, I think that it would benefit us to put something like that together for people so that they understand. But the good news is that we're going to have more options to make those decisions. In the past, it was just if you didn't have Fusion, you couldn't really do any automations. So now we're getting into a world where some of these automations could potentially be built into the system instead of it being bespoke every time. And that's really what this is going to do, is it's giving more options, particularly to think about it to the little guy. We're enterprise level, so we're looking at the biggest, greatest, best tools. We might even have bigger budgets than some of the little guy. But I think that when we start to articulate and realize that if a company across the organization or across the globe is able to use a tool that could be built into the system, I think it would benefit Adobe to do that. So I think that's what they're exploring right now, and it's nice to have options. And that it's not just, if you don't have Fusion, you're not going to be able to do this kind of stuff. That was really the impetus for putting this session together. When I went to Adobe Summit, I saw that a lot of people were struggling to see how planning and core could connect. And so we spent a lot of time talking about the AI space, but I still felt like there was a lot that we could cover to bring everybody along for the ride, just to work on, well, how can we get our tools connected today? And I think that one of the things that was the impetus for us to make this decision is we had people that were refusing to do their work in the system. For example, the designers in the creative services team, they were used to having all of their information at the task level. They don't want to have to drill up into a project. That's ridiculous. So that's what I mean, is that you need to meet your clients where they are. It's not about what I think they should be doing. It's easy for me. It's really to meet them where they are and to give them a solution that they want to use using the tool. And that was really the impetus for us to even broach the subject of Fusion, was that we needed to increase our user adoption. We also needed to give some time back to our project managers. We were spending an exorbitant amount of time setting up projects. And this really took that time and gave it back to them to become more strategic instead of spending half of their time setting up projects. So that was a big change for us. Any other questions from you? Yes. There are so many steps. Yes, absolutely. And that's why, again, I think this didn't happen overnight. I mean, how long did it take us to build this, Meg? It was like 6 months.
It was a while.
It was a while.
Yeah, it took a while just to figure out all the different components and steps that we needed to take. And there's been numerous revisions to the process that we created as well. So it's just kind of like we release it, see how it goes. And if there's something that enough people say, hey, we'd like to see it this way, then we, go back to the drawing board. So there's always revisions happening. But I would love to see some more connections between planning and core just out of the box. A request coming from planning into core and being connected without needing fusion would be beautiful, lovely. Also, being able to attach a document and planning request would be great. That's something that we don't have the ability to do. So little things like that I think that those are probably improvements that will come with time. But our leadership loves the look and feel of planning. And so that was important to give them something that made sense to them and was easy to navigate.
Yeah, we
Or
migrated
so
this.
easy to navigate for everyone.
Yeah, we migrated a team from another work management system into this one. And planning was the thing that set them apart from the other tool. And that really was the way for us to get them to be like, oh, okay, this is actually kind of nice. I could see this. It's the visual nature of planning is very attractive for leadership, because then they can get a really solid view of what's going on without having to drill down into a project. It's the visual nature. Leadership really likes that. So that's why we did it this way.
Yeah. Reports and core are great. Reports and dashboards are great, but you also have to kind of learn how to read those reports. And in planning, it's just kind of like what you see is just laid out there for you very plainly. It's very user friendly. So,
There's also opportunities to connect even other larger teams. If you have an events team, if you have a paid media team, there's all sorts of opportunity here. The operational record that we showed you today as an example was a content deliverable record. It was programs with heroes. That's really what the purpose of that is. But there's much more work than just that we do here. So we first had to get the buy-in to then justify the spend to continue to build it. And so we used this as a use case. And by having a use case, and then also doing the connections and showing the connections on paper first, the conversation with the brief happened with the stakeholder for 3.5 months. And there were hundreds of questions in their first intake. So we culled it down to 15. 100 to 15. And so and that was diligent, where we had to talk about every single field. Why do you believe? And it was to talk through it. It was just having an emotionally intelligent conversation about why. Okay, why do you feel you need this form on here? And then who does it affect? How many people is going to be involved? Why is that important? And asking those questions that makes them actually stop and think, maybe that's really not necessary. And I always had to ask a question. Is this important information for us to start work on the project? Or is that information that should be revealed during the project over time? So there was a lot of that distinction, like understanding when is it a build question and when is it a form that maybe we need to ask later in the process, which is what we do.
Especially because on initial intake, they don't always know all the details. It's kind of like big picture when they want to put in a new program request. They may not even know what the hero deliverable is going to be at that point. So that's why we had to make it so flexible for them to add information as they go. Get it in there and then go from there. Awesome. Any other questions before we go? I think we've got all of the questions that came in the chat. We're always available. So feel free to email us or whatever with your questions as they come up. But we really appreciate you all coming. So many from all over the US and beyond. There was somebody from India here.
That's awesome. Well, we just have a couple of closing slides here, and we just want to let you know of some upcoming events that we have coming. So if you would like to register for that, you could do that here on this screen, and we will also share this deck at the end. Stay connected with our chapter. If you'd like to join our chapter, we would love to have you. There's a whole host of many wonderful chapters and leaders. I mean, we're surrounded by greatness at Workfront. I got to tell you, I love this space, and I just love the minds that come together and share. The sharing here is my favorite part about what we do, and it feels like a really connected community. So I appreciate that. So come join us. And so thanks so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, we'll continue this conversation in Experience League. We'll continue to share other sessions that are relevant to what we're doing. And we look forward to seeing you around the halls of Adobe WUG sessions.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
See you around.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.